CO, and welcome to the Tribal Stewardship Policy and Toolkit's Basics of Property Law for Tribal Stewardship webinar. Today's webinar is provided as part of the California Natural Resources Agency's Tribal Stewardship Policy and Toolkit. And this policy toolkit and the webinars and resources provided are for specific toolkit entries and are intended to increase the capacity of tribes, state agencies, and non-tribal entities to advance tribal stewardship, which includes tribal access, collaboration, and ancestral land return, according to the California Natural Resources Agency's Tribal Stewardship Policy. The Basics for Property Law for Tribal Stewardship webinar will overview the basics of property law tools that will support tribes in advancing tribal stewardship across the state. We're so excited to have not only agency staff joining us, but representatives from the Sustainable Economies Law Center joining us and walking through a range of legal tools from those that enable sharing of space to full title transfer to learning more about California's specific property laws, including the Public Trust Doctrine. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website, the Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit website. And so you can rewatch it at your leisure if you are wanting to get back to some of the information that we're sharing with you all today. Again, a huge wado and thank you to everyone who's joined us for today's webinar. We will have a limited time at the end of the webinar to answer questions, but we warmly welcome you all to utilize the Q&A chat function that is on the top of your screen throughout the presentation to type out any questions you might have for our panelists and folks who are joining us from the CNRA team as well as the Law Center team can work to answer those questions in that chat. So please use that chat feature to submit your questions on the basics of property law for tribal stewardship. If you would like to receive updates and information on upcoming webinars for the Tribal Stewardship Policy Toolkit, we'll put a link in that chat for you all so you can sign up for our email listserv. While today's webinar is not considered a tribal consultation, we hope it will provide resources and information to support tribes in advancing their goals and priorities in the stewardship and conservation space. The California Natural Resources Agency always welcomes the opportunity to consult with California Native American tribes. And please do not hesitate to reach out if your tribe would like to schedule a consultation on the stewardship policy or anything else. Today's webinar is adapted from the Sustainable Economies Law Center's Seeds of Land Return Toolkit, which was published in 2022. A huge wado and thank you to Sustainable Economies Law Center for not only creating these resources and making them public, but being here today to share this information with us all. And we'll provide, again, in that chat, a link to their resources so you can do that deeper dive in the amazing work that they have prepared in supporting land return and property acquisitions. And so we'll get that information to you all here shortly. We'll be presenting and going through the slides and hope to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. But again, as a friendly reminder, please use that Q&A feature that is on the top of your screen to drop in any questions throughout the webinar, and we're going to do our best to answer them at the end of the session. And so with that, we will move on to the next slide, please. For some quick introductions. Oh, thank you. I apologize. I got that order wrong. So some quick introductions. My name is Geneva E.B. Thompson. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, she, her pronouns, and very honored to serve as the Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency. And I am so excited that Dorian Paella is joining us here today, who is a staff attorney for Sustainable Economies Law Center. Dorian has not only a staff attorney for the Sustainable Economies Law Center with a focus on food systems work throughout the framework of ecology. Oh, that's a new word for me. Ecology. I love it. Dorian's work is also focused on supporting the development of land ethic that is based on rematriation and can serve to create land relations where all people can belong to the land. And so thank you so much, Dorian, for being here and sharing the Sustainable Economies Law Center resources with us here today. So, and jumping into our presentation, if we can go to the next slide, please. And while we're doing that, a huge water and thank you to Sydney Anderson. Thank you for putting all of these resources together. Sydney is running the PowerPoint here today and really has been a huge resource in putting together today's webinar. So Wado, and thank you so much, Sydney. And so starting us off, the tribal concepts of property law. And so what we really wanted to do before we got into the nitty-gritty of what federal and California property law looks at is really to share and have a better understanding that tribes have had concepts of property law that predate the United States, that predate property common law, and the systems that I think a lot of people who are on the call here today are used to. And so tribes, as being those stewards of the land of what we now know as California, since time immemorial, have developed complex governance structures and relations to the land, resources, waters, airs, minerals, etc., right, that are informed by tribal law and policy. And those concepts have been critical for the care of these lands and the relation to people and land and how the governance structures of the care of land have been developing and way predate the state of California in a lot of the property laws that we are sharing with you all today. And so as folks are very aware, each tribe as a sovereign nation have their own laws, policies, and cultures associated with these concepts of property law and rule. And this is something that is independently formed with each tribe across the state. And so a great rule, right, is if you know one tribe, right? And so every sovereign nation has its own processes as it relates to property law. And, you know, without trying to paint a very generalizing brush, but for many tribes, especially pre-contact, this property law has been more of a communal or village type ownership concepts of property law. And we see a lot of times, especially in the pre-contact space, that individuals owning property is more of a unique space to be in. But then after colonization and forced removal and application of federal and state kind of property law concepts, that governance of property law and ownership has shifted drastically when the United States comes on and the state of California is formed. And so the existing current day jurisdictions under that federal as well as state processes are playing out in today's relation to land. And you see that impacting how tribes are thinking about and managing their properties and developing, you know, current day type property laws and regulations as it relates to their lands. So some tribes might maintain pre-contact property law concepts, while others might have adopted a non-tribal principles of property law for their trust lands. And then generally speaking, you know, of course, there are always exceptions to have to keep track of, but generally speaking, non-trust lands, federal and state property laws typically apply. So we can do the next slide, please. So for non-tribal property law, we like to kind of articulate this idea of a bundle of rights. And this idea that ownership of land is a complex proposition that it's not as simple as the goal is, you know, for a lot of folks to acquire as many rights as possible when acquiring property, but that these rights can be separated and reassembled and might be held by multiple owners. And so a concept that you see a lot of folks utilize when thinking about non-tribal property law is a bundle of sticks type concept, where each stick represents an individual right. And that a property owner may possess one or a combination of sticks as it relates to land. A classic example is one owner owns the surface rights, the surface property, and another owner might own the mineral rights underneath that surface land. And so you have these kind of bundle of sticks kind of idea and concept as it relates to non-tribal property law. And we can do the next slide, please. You also see that there's some kind of like 5 basic property rights that a lot of folks keep track of. It's the right of possession, the right of control, the right of exclusion, the right of enjoyment, and the right of disposition. And so all of these rights are things to kind of think about as you are considering ancestral land return projects or acquiring property for your tribe. And thinking about who owns what rights as it relates to that process is something that we recommend folks kind of keep a close eye on and thinking about as you go through property acquisitions. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And then the last thing that we would like to share with you all is the California's Public Trust Doctrine. And so the Public Trust Doctrine is originated in English common law. And so again, this is a non-tribal legal kind of conception of property. And this English common law has then been included in the California Constitution and other state legislation. And so something that we wanted to share with folks as you're thinking about the realm of possibilities for property acquisition and ancestral land return projects, something that's going to be really important for folks to keep track of is the California Public Trust Doctrine. And so the public trust provides that the tide and submerged lands and beds of lakes, streams, and other navigable waterways, which include the 3-mile wide band of submerged lands adjacent to the California coast, are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the people of California. And so there are some allowable uses for these waterways by the public, and this has evolved over time, but generally can include commerce, navigation, and fisheries of water recreation, and preservation of lands to protect scenic and wildlife habitat values. The State Lands Commission is the entity within the state of California that has that administrative jurisdiction over these public trust lands and are a wonderful partner to connect with if your tribe is thinking through and considering how to be in relation to these lands that are covered under this public trust. And so something that's really important for folks to keep track of is that uses must be aligned with the public trust values, which are generally including this water-oriented uses and activities that facilitate that public access. And so I have some links that I'm going to put in the chat for additional resources on that public trust doctrine. And if we can go to the next slide. And now, very excited to hand it over to Doreen, who is going to walk us through the Sustainable Economies Law Center's Seeds of Land Return Toolkit. So thank you so much, Doreen, for being here, and we'll hand you the mic.
Thank you so much. We're grateful to have been brought onto the session. And we're glad that our Seeds of Land Return Toolkit has caught the attention of some folks at the agency here. We hope it continues to be a resource to you all. So this is a living toolkit, which is to say that it's responsive to your needs, to the needs of those who are looking to use it. And we hope that we can continue fine-tuning it to facilitate land return. With that being said, we do want to acknowledge that most of the clients that we have helped inform this toolkit have been land justice projects and non-federally recognized tribes in a lot of instances. So I do want to just acknowledge that we have a limited, albeit growing understanding of the particular issues that federally recognized tribes have to deal with, such as the FEDA trust process. So want to make that aware. We can go on to the next slide as well. So this guide also doesn't address the growing popularity of co-management and co-stewardship agreements that we see between sovereign nations. Generally, though, there are some tools and provisions here in this guide that can begin to inform this process. So I think it's still a very useful resource. When we wrote this guide, we geared it towards private landowners who are interested in returning their land to tribes or really wanting to be in right relationship. It's often the people who have been reckoning with the impacts of colonization or are wanting to set up a pattern of repair moving forward. So we had this toolkit been written with private landowners in mind, but it works with many different people. It works with everyone, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve a private landowner. So I just, again, want to continue to expand the possibilities of this toolkit being used for multiple purposes. And we also wanted to use the idea of the seed, of course. as we write here, seeds hold the genetic blueprint for plants. And when we think of it as a metaphor, when we return land to community stewardship or to indigenous stewardship, we don't want to be confined with how it can fit within the legal system. We want it to actually serve as a seed of a relationship that can grow beyond that. The seeds we provide here are meant to be simple, not long and complex, so they're meant to be accessible. I think at the Law Center, we're also committed to making the legal relationships that sustain us accessible so that we know how we're impacted by them and how we can navigate them as well. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, this is a little more about the metaphor, but we're essentially saying it's, play with it. It's intuitive. It becomes more intuitive throughout time. Lean into the relationship. The legal templates that we use here are also very simple, and they're often filled with cartoons. Despite this, though, the legal templates that we'll be using today are actually legally enforceable, and if they're used, they are legally enforceable, so they can be filled out as is. I also do want to note that we have an anatomy of land transfer as part of our resources, but it's not included in our seeds of land return. There are many steps related to a land transfer, some of which we won't go through here, but those might go beyond this guide. Okay, so onto this seed packets. We wanted to divide the seeds of land return into three main sections. The first section has agreements that are meant to support in, as you mentioned earlier, sharing the space. So these relationships will most likely, at least initially, continue to have the current owner in the relationship with the land. We've seen these agreements be most supportive when maybe relationships are just being developed or when there's limited capacity from a tribe currently from taking title to the land. It might often be the case, though, that the tribe is developing that capacity. So it's not to say that it's a static thing. The second section is meant to arrange for future title transfer. So these agreements are meant to secure the future of transfer of land, either through offers or certain guarantees. And the third section is meant to support the transferring of land return. This includes a simple sale, a gift, or a transfer with a relationship that can be retained by the owner. So these tools, and I'll go into this a little more later, can always be mixed or matched. They're not mutually exclusive. They can be used in conjunction with each other. So I'd always encourage folks to play around with look at our slide, which is public, or our slideshow, which is public, and see what fits to your context specifically. All right, so on to the agreements. The first one that I'd like to start with is the land access agreement. So this is a very simple land access agreement. It can also be considered what's called a license. It's basically the invitation, the right to be able to enter the land and be in relationship with the land. It's going to differ between a lease or an easement, which we'll speak of in a bit. But this is an agreement that is basically saying you can come onto this land and it might have a purpose, a time, or activity that can be defined by the relationship between the landowner and it's like a lease, but it doesn't go as far to give people exclusive access to a particular area. And it's also like an easement, but it doesn't give permanent access. This will make a little more sense as I go into the other ones. So for example, as we have an example here, perhaps you arrange for a group to regularly come onto your land. So this is us speaking to the landowner. And they get to spend time with and get to know the land, maybe get to tend, to the ecosystem of a creek that might be on the land, or tend to a harvest, a seasonal harvest that's available. This is a great first step in developing a relationship. The next one I can talk about is the lease. So we can go to the next slide. So a lease says you have exclusive use of this area, where the land access agreement is not exclusive. A lease can be exclusive. And of course, we have relationships, or we have experience with leases in as renters. If we've ever rented a house or an apartment, that's what a lease is meant to be. It's meant to be the ability to enter the premises of another person, but have an exclusive relationship with that. So it means you have an exclusive use of that area. You can craft the lease to different scenarios. So you can say what certain spaces are meant to be exclusive and are meant to maybe just be retained for the tribe, what spaces are shared, for what purposes, for how long. One of the things that we do like to keep in consideration for a lease is that any lease that is longer than 35 years is considered a change of ownership. And so it will be reassessed for tax value. So that's just one thing to keep into consideration if thinking about things like property taxes. If there's housing involved, you'll also run into landlord-tenant law. So there are certain things that a landlord must provide for a tenant, what things, if at all, are charged, and how and when a lease can be ended. So they vary a lot depending on what that lease looks like, what the context of the land is, and what uses are happening on the land. You can write them yourself by just, starting with the bullet points of the who, what, where, what, when, and how. And the other questions can develop through time. Of course, we always encourage folks to look at the local law, what sort of disclosures are there, and what is necessary to have a lease. So we have a couple of links down here of a residential lease that we've used in the past, a commercial lease that's part of a lease for a commercial tenant. We're also developing leases that might be more fit to certain rural contexts. Okay, now we can go on to an easement. So an easement basically says you have certain rights or a relationship to a land permanently. So the big thing about an easement is that we like to say is the easement runs with the land. So it's meant to be a permanent relationship to the land. Easements are fairly flexible in how they're used. They have many purposes. Conservation easements, for example, can allow for a conservation land trust to enforce the power to take care of the land and to ensure that certain activities aren't happening, so the integrity or the ecological preservation of the land is ensured. Cultural conservation easements, which we also work with, go further. They give groups, indigenous groups specifically, access to the land to carry out certain cultural practices, such as wild plant harvesting and ceremony. So, for example, you can grant an indigenous group an easement to permanently be able to access part of the land, maybe for harvest, for ceremony. You might also be able to grant a community land trust, an easement to be able to permanently protect an area of land of specific significance, making sure that it doesn't get developed or that it doesn't get put back on the speculative market. So we have a rematriation easement, or what's sometimes alternatively called a kinship conservation easement. And it's an easement that's meant to highlight what cultural values, ecological values of significance to the tribe are present there that we would want preserved. And an easement does just that. The great thing about an easement too is that if there's a property owner who has an easement on their land and then they decide to sell the land, the easement will carry on to the next property owner, which is to say it's not going to be extinguished once the land gets sold. And that's what we mean when we say the easement runs with the land. And it's meant to be really a relationship that can sustain through multiple cycles of ownership. Okay, we can move on now to the second section of our seed packets. So this is a purchase right. A purchase right basically says you can purchase this land from me for X amount of money when perhaps I want to sell it. Usually purchase rights are either rights of first refusal or purchase options. So a right of first refusal is basically the landowner saying, at the time that I choose to sell this land, you will be the first person I notify, and you will be the first person I will allow to make an offer. So that's a purchase right. A purchase option is when you are ready to buy. So you have the right, if you are wanting to acquire land, to say, I get to exercise this right to purchase your land at the time that I deem ready. This is often of good benefit in cases where maybe there's fundraising happening for the land that hasn't been yet acquired, and you need a little bit more time. So you want to make sure that you lock in this future possibility of having the opportunity to purchase the land. So here are also, again, some templates that we have. We have a purchase right, and we have a right of first offer. For example, you can grant a purchase right to a land trust that enables them to purchase your house for $100,000 when you're ready to sell. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So this is a life estate. A life estate says the remainder interest in this land now belongs to you, meaning you'll receive full title upon my death. A life estate is great in an instance where someone is resolute in wanting to return their land, but they want to make sure that they get to live on their land or on the land at least as long as they live. And so they just want to ensure, I want this land to be returned to its rightful stewards, but I want to be able to live here for the remainder of my life. And so that can actually be arranged so that the person doesn't feel like they have to leave immediately. You would execute a deed that grants basically the land to the tribe, and then it grants the ability for the person to continue living on the land for the rest of their life. So let's see. This is also good in contrast to many estate planning tools, right? So like wills and trusts, because they tend to be irrevocable, which means that they can be reversed. So a life estate can be executed immediately. And in the instance of a landowner looking for a charitable or tax deduction, it can also give you a bit of a benefit there. But this is one that we like to use, especially when there's a relationship there that wants to be cultivated. The relationship is there. It's resolute that the land will go back to the tribe, but they want to be able to live on the land at least as long as they live. We can go on to the next one, please. An estate gift, similar, but we call it a bequest also. So it doesn't create an immediate relationship to the land in the way that a life estate would, but it does arrange for the land to be transferred after the landowner's death. So you can use a will, a trust, or what's called a TODD, a transfer on death deed. Funny legal terms. To leave your land to a group when you die, or be returned to its rightful stewards when you pass. So the difference between these is with a will, the estate administrator will transfer the title through a court supervised process. This is called probate. So when when land is in probate, this is what they mean. With a trust, you'll actually have a trustee that will make the transfer, and they'll circumvent probate, so they won't have to go through probate. With a TODD, land transfers automatically when you die, so you actually don't have to go through that process. And again, this is different than a life estate because you can still revoke a TODD while you're alive. So I like to encourage life estates, definitely, just to make sure that that commitment is there and it's secured. So for example, you can just write a simple will, leaving your house to a tribe, perhaps along with $75,000 to help the land, or to help the tribe take care of the land. Sometimes it's called like a stewardship endowment fund, or something similar. We also have a couple of simple wills and simple trust here, and a simple TODD, and it's very easy to fill out. All right, and now we're moving on to transfers. So this is my favorite one. I like to encourage this one. Gift, right? So a gift is basically saying, this land is yours. I want nothing in return. I am returning this land back. A gift of land is simple, but it's also very powerful, I think. Compared to a sale, it can be done with very little paperwork. When you're making a gift, especially one that's motivated by wanting to be in a right relationship and motivated by generosity, um, you won't have to treat it as income or pay taxes on it, even if it's a tax-paying entity that you're transferring it to. Of course, we say if you want to receive a deduction, you'll want to give it to a 501c3. But here's an example. If you give a land to, in one of the instances, for example, a non-federally recognized tribe that we work with, the transfer was done to the individual. So although they're an individual, they won't pay taxes on it because the gift is not treated as an income. So we have a simple gift agreement. And then we also have other disclosures that you would want to include just when making a land transfer. So they're not all required in transfers, but sometimes we say it doesn't hurt to provide them. And then there's also some tax forms like change of ownership report or the form 593, which is used when giving a gift. Okay. Now we have a simple sale. This is, your basic transaction. It basically says, I want you to have this land, and while I need some money, I hope to keep this as simple and low cost as possible. And this is sort of the message that we want to convey in the Seeds of Land Return, right? In wanting to be in the spirit of land return. If there's going to be a transaction that is needed, we're hoping that it's not cost prohibitive in that way, or it's not meant to solely the spirit of wanting to return the land. And so many real estate purchases get super tangled in paperwork and unnecessary pressure, especially when they involve things like mortgage lenders and real estate agents and lawyers, I will say, and who advocate for clients to take as much as they can get. I think that sort of gets in the way of really wanting to be in the sort of spirit of repair. So it's often possible, I say, to keep things simple, especially when it's a low cost sale. Bargain sales can also help offset taxes as well, so that they can be of benefit to folks. So we have a simple sale agreement, and then we have a couple of documents as well to accompany it. So of course, again, disclosures, as I mentioned in the gift, a grant deed, and certain tax forms that you would want to fill out if you're looking to get a tax break, related to a bargain sale if you're selling it below market value. And this is, I believe, where we have the anatomy of the land transfer as well. So just for your future viewing, we have an explanation of what happens in a typical real estate transfer, which is really fascinating. Just so many steps that are happening when land is transferring. And then also a guide to transfer real estate without professionals, which we've been able to do in the past without the use of the suite of professionals that usually huddle around the land transfer. Okay, and the last one that I'll speak of is a transfer with a retained relationship. This is kind of like a life estate in some way, in that it's meant to transfer the land immediately, but sometimes people do develop a meaningful relationship to the land as well. Maybe there's a lake on the land, or maybe one of their ancestors is buried there. They would want to be able to have a retained relationship with the land where they're able to visit, or and we've seen that that's been made possible in the past. So the language says, this land is yours now, and perhaps I want to retain a relationship to the land or other rights, just maybe to visit here or to live here. So in our real estate, ownership system, as we just talked about, we have this idea of the bundle of rights. You can transfer your ownership, but maybe, preserve one of those sticks to be able to access the land as well. And when transferring sticks, you can retain one or more, like maybe even the right to continue living there, or which, we don't, maybe the right to receive income from the land to support you. So for example, maybe you have a home with a back cottage on a very large lot and you want to transfer the title to the land trust immediately, but you want to be able to have a life lease to the back cottage. This differs in the way that the life estate differs a bit, but it's generally in the same spirit, just wanting to make sure that the land transfer is there, but that the relationship stays. So we also have a seed of a retained relationship here, just some retained relationship language. Of course, we'd always encourage folks, especially non-tribal landowners, to really just assess the impact of what that retained relationship looks like, and so that it doesn't encumber or, like, again, solely the relationship of repair that's trying to be advocated for here. Okay, so those are like our 9 basic tools. There's some other things that we take into consideration, of course. How are we doing on time? We got a couple of time. Okay. Some of the things that we like to say is the soil is critical, keeping with the seeds metaphor, right? And so what we're saying is really like center the relationship of the transaction, or of the return. And we do think often, I mean, those are really what make the legal tools effective, and they're oftentimes more important than the legal tools. I think a lot of the times, when we come as lawyers with like these fancy legal tools, we tend to paralyze that spirit of the relationship, and we create like this adversarial system. So we just want to encourage, for people to come wanting to hold good relationships. As we mentioned earlier, these are companion seeds, so they're not mutually exclusive with each other. You can use multiple seeds. So for example, you could start with the land access agreement, start being reintroduced to the land, having that relationship there, and then maybe have a purchase right, so that when the tribe is ready to purchase or take the land back, then that relationship, that right is there at a time that feels good. Or, you can also have a simple
Uh-oh, Dorian, I think we might have lost you there for a second. Sydney, can you hear me?
Yeah, Geneva, I can hear you, but I think Dorian's frozen for me as well.
Uh-oh. Dorian, can you hear us? Well, maybe while Dorian is fixing his audio and visual, I'll kind of continue on this slide here. But really, it was just the idea is the professional support, and as I think Dorian was sharing, property acquisitions can be a complex process, but it also doesn't have to be so complex that folks should shy away from it and not engage with opportunities for land return. But typically, if you are wanting professional support, highly recommend working closely with realtors and attorneys to kind of navigate some of these processes. But also just know that you all, as stewards and caretakers of the land, and have that deep expertise, and what's right for these lands, and what needs to be protected. And so also push your hired professionals, right? Push your realtors, push your attorneys, make sure that your priorities are being reflected in these acquisition documents, because you know what you need for the land, and the professionals that you are working for should find creative opportunities and creative solutions to work closely with you to advance those priorities. And so really hope that this PowerPoint presentation can provide some background knowledge to help you work closely with your professionals on that. This slide is talking about the common requests from land stewards, right? And something that you see a lot when you're going through land return processes is the land tells a story. There's a deep history, and I know we don't need to tell tribes this, right? This is something that you live and breathe every single day. But also folks who are non-tribal members who are owning lands and have been stewarding lands also have a deep history with those properties. And so something that is always kind of helpful to kind of keep top of mind is that people feel connected to the lands that they care for, and that being open to and having those conversations with landowners around their history and their connection of the land help kind of strengthen those partnerships and those relationships as you go through what Dorian was explaining at times can be a clunky kind of legalese type process. And so there is some kind of common humanity as it relates to the care and stewardship of land. And that's something that the Sustainable Economies Law Center is trying to articulate here is know that history and connect in that space. And then this slide is talking about how there are a few laws to consider that this PowerPoint presentation did not get into. And I know that there's a couple questions in the Q&A feature also asking about this. Property taxes, right? That in of itself is something to be very aware of, and work closely with your professionals and understanding the tax burdens as it relates to properties. And so I know that this presentation did not get into a lot of details around property taxes, but there are tax components during the sale of property, as well as those annual taxes to keep track of. And then the limits on the use of land. So this is something that is very important to keep track of as well as it relates to zoning laws. A lot of cities and counties have their own zoning laws of what is and isn't allowed to be done on land within their jurisdictions. Some properties are under homeowners association rules. Other properties might have different kind of rules and limits on how to use your land. And so that due diligence period when you're going through property acquisition is critical. So the lay of, I almost said the lay of the land, which is kind of confusing, but like the realm, right, of what's at play for the particular property that you're looking at before you acquire it. So doing that due diligence, understanding the zoning laws that apply to the land before you purchase it is a way of avoiding surprises down the road. There are also some kind of prohibitions by lenders. If property has a mortgage on it, you might have to clear that mortgage before they can sell the land. There might be other types of easements or property purchase options for land trusts. And so it's just something to keep your eyes on for those prohibitions that are put on by mortgage lenders. And if your tribe is acquiring property utilizing a grant, state dollars, be aware of what is in your grant agreement and what kind of requirements come with those grant dollars for the acquisition of property, because that is going to be something also to kind of keep track of as it relates to the buying of property. And then this last point here that the Sustainable Economies Law Center has provided is income tax incentives, right? And so think through what are those opportunities for property owners to access charitable tax deductions. Sometimes folks can get some relief in their personal or business taxes or whatever else, right? If they are giving the land or going through kind of a bargain like sell or granting easements to 501c3 nonprofits. And I think this income tax incentive is something that a lot of private landowners are very aware of and are considering as they go through their land return options and working with tribes. You also see this is why a lot of tribes create their own land trusts and incorporate those land trusts as a 501c3. And so it opens up opportunities for tribes to navigate and find those kind of income tax incentive benefits. And also on the back end, right, those property tax incentives as well. And so we did not go into a lot of details on that today, but just some things to keep track of as you're going through your acquisitions. And I'm wondering if Dorian has been able to log back in. Does anyone seeing Dorian just yet?
I'm here. Thank you so
awesome.
much.
I'll hand it back to you. Anything to correct and add on what I shared in the presentation?
No, that was great. Thank you so much. And apologies.
No worries. Tech happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah, tech happens. Absolutely. So this is the last slide, just to say, I think as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are some things that are not included in this toolkit. So of course we are developing our understanding in the vita trust process. And then there are also other complexities that are not addressed in this toolkit. So split title, for example, this is often seen in community land trusts, for example, where the land trust might own the ground underneath, but then another individual or entity might own the improvements above, such as the house. So we didn't go into too much detail into the complexities of a split title here. Tenancy in common. Tenancy in common happens when two or more people come to purchase land together. And so that's something that we also haven't considered, especially when there is one person out of maybe the two people that are owning the land that is wanting to return their interest. And so we didn't fully cover that. We also didn't cover irrevocable trusts. So irrevocable trusts are more complex to create than something like a simple life estate. But they, in the future, could be good options when an owner wants to create a binding commitment to transfer the land. And this is something that we spoke of when we were talking about life estates, for example. Just seeing that it's nice to have that commitment there to be sustained for long term. And lastly, installment sales. So this is when a buyer pays the seller over time, and then the title transfers when all the payments are completed. So to reduce the risk that the land stewardship group may not later transfer, we instead recommend seller financing, meaning that the group takes title and then makes payments to the former owner over agreed upon period, just to create a better relationship there. But thank you so much for letting me talk on our Seeds of Land Return, and we really do hope it's continues to be a resource to you all.
Well, Wado, and thank you so much, Dorian. I really appreciate you walking us through this. And we wanted to make sure you all had the links that you need to not only check out Sustainable Economies Law Center and all of the amazing resources they have, but then also specifically the Seeds of Land Return PowerPoint, which we put the link in the chat as well. But Dorian, anything that you wanted to share about Sustainable Economies Law Center?
Of course. So if you're looking to get into contact with us, we do have weekly legal cafes where we offer free legal one-time consultations. And so those are available online, and you can register on our website as well. So if you're wanting to think about some of the questions that were presented in the Seeds of Land Return, or any questions in general, please feel free and reach out to us. And you can sign up to as many legal cafes as feel necessary to you. And we'd also just say, check out our other resources. As I mentioned, we try to make the law as accessible as possible so that you can understand it and be able to navigate it with confidence. So please take a browse at our resources. We're always here to be a resource. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I just put the link to the legal cafe in the chat. So if folks want to check that out. I know there's like, I could benefit from meeting with you all in that cafe. So that is awesome. Thank you. So I know we have about 9 minutes left. And so we have a couple questions lined up that, Dorian, if you're open to it, we can chat through. But as we get these questions going, wanted to just remind folks that our next webinar is going to be on October 10th from 1 to 2 p.m. And we're going to be doing a case study, actually, and learning how the State Lands Commission and Caltrans partnered with Lone Pine Paiute Tribe on some ancestral land return for some school lands out in their ancestral territory. So this is going to be a webinar where we get in the weeds on a specific project and learning how the State Lands Commission can be a partner for your tribe and thinking through opportunities to partner with the state and advance tribal stewardship. So if you're available and interested, please check us out. And it'll be on October 10th at 1 p.m. You can use that QR code that's on the screen, and I'm going to paste it, the sign up in the chat as well. And so I know that there are a lot of questions in this Q&A, but something that a couple folks had on was regarding, So there's a question that, Dorian, I'm wondering if you could help us better understand was there's a question around non-transferable trusts. And
Mm.
is there a way to adjust those non-transferable trusts so that land can actually be transferred to a tribe? And I'm assuming in this situation, the tribe might not have been considered as an eligible entity in that non-transferable trust. Any insights on non-transferable trust? Well, let's see if I can spit that word out.
That's a great question, and it's not something that we've taken a deep dive into. So I would like to put it on the queue for our research.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
So I will. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so for future learning there. So thank you for that complex question there. And so maybe will follow up in a future time on that one. And then another question that we had, I mean, there's some tax questions, which I think getting into taxes is going to be a whole nother deep dive. So if folks are comfortable with that, we'll put a pin on the property taxes for a future toolkit entry. Another question that we have is insights that can be shared regarding purpose trusts. I don't know, Dorian, if you're
Mm.
familiar with a purpose trust. I think that might be similar to some of the other trusts that you were sharing.
Yeah, we're developing more of an understanding over purpose trusts. So I typically see that in maybe social corporations or like B corporations that want to make sure that the trustee or the beneficiary of a trust is not perhaps a person or a tribe or an individual, but it's actually a purpose that's being fulfilled. And so I'd be curious in what ways a purpose trust is being considered in this context. I have seen it become a tool for like hybrid CLT models. But yeah, I think it depends on how they're envisioning that interfacing with the land. I do see it being of a benefit if there's maybe like an economic enterprise on the land that is going to continue providing income, and you want to make sure that that income perhaps isn't just going to an individual, but is meant to sustain maybe the stewardship of the land. I could see a perpetual purpose trust working there. But from my understanding, yes, a perpetual purpose trust is meant to benefit a purpose and not a specific individual.
Oh,
Specific, yeah.
interesting.
Mhm.
And I love that idea of like generating economic, development opportunities that then feeds into the conservation of land. Because I know that's something that a lot of tribes are grappling with is we got this land back, but man, now we got to fundraise to care for it, right? And the management costs that associate with that. And so a perpetual purpose trust. Oh, say that 5 times quick, right? It's an interesting thing to explore. So thank you so much. And then another question that we have is the person giving a life estate um, may include an enforceable conditions on the care of the property by later residents. And if that is something that folks are wanting to do, what kind of particular language would you recommend in that space? So I think enforceable conditions on a life estate is kind of what this question is grappling with.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm curious if they're wondering enforceable conditions on behalf of the tribe that it's being transferred to, or on the actual existing landowner, like including conditions. In that instance, as we mentioned, after the tools, I think we like to promote folks to really restrict from leaving encumbrances or anything that would really get in the way of making sure that that relationship with the land can happen meaningfully. So, if there's a land transfer, but it has a series of conditions attached to them, is that going to be restrictive to the tribe being able to be in meaningful relationship with the land once again? And so that is, of course, the great thing about coming in relationship and negotiating an agreement, is that it really meant to center that. So it 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 would vary to what extent it's possible, but I would always encourage folks to to leave as little of an encumbrance as possible when doing that transfer.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think maybe even just like in a more general sense, right? Like a lot of these conversations can be iterative and you can negotiate these with
Mhm.
the buyers and the sellers, right? And thinking through how to fine tune, right, these legal mechanisms in a way to advance tribal priorities. So thank you for that. And then we also had another question. Will these webinars provide MCLE credits for California attorneys? Great question. And right now, unfortunately, no, we're not able to provide MCLEs. But I'm so glad that there's so many attorneys online who are thinking about that. And I saw your question, I was like, I need some MCLEs. What an interesting suggestion. So we can explore it, but at this time, no, we're not able to offer MCLEs. And if you're someone who's joining us who doesn't know what MCLE is, that is just a professional education credit that attorneys have to do every 3 years, I believe, is the cycle to get a certain amount of education credits. So if you don't know what it is, you don't have to worry about it. But thanks for the question. So let's see. And then another question is, will these webinars continue? And yes. And so very excited to have we have actually a long list of topics that we've heard from tribes. So we have been consulting on the tribal stewardship policy for almost 2 years now. And through these consultations, when we get some specific questions on deep dive topics that tribes are interested in that would benefit them in advancing meaningful and durable tribal access, collaboration, and ancestral land return, we've been writing those down. And so we have a long list of a wide variety of different topics that we are excited to cover in these webinar series, and we'll have those recordings posted on our website. And thank you, Sydney, for bringing that up. Here is our website. And so if it's a little bit long of a title here, but resources.ca.gov/initiatives/tribal affairs /tribal stewardship policy is going to be our website where all of these recordings will live. And because you all are here, we'll make sure that we follow up with some additional information with you all. But if you're wanting to get those regular contact of our upcoming webinars, please join our email list. This QR code will take you there, and we can sign you up for our regular email list. I'm also pasting in the chat right now. If you're not a QR person, you can sign up here at that link I just pasted in the chat, and you will get regular communications from us about all the upcoming webinars. And so with that, if you all could help me thank Dorian for his time and expertise. Virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this such helpful information. I know that it's going to support a lot of tribes in acquiring their ancestral lands and for their land return projects. So just a huge wado and thank you for everything that you're doing and your colleagues at the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Y'all are doing such amazing work. Go talk to them at their legal cafes if you've got any follow-up questions. And any last remarks, Dorian, that you'd like to share with the group?
Thank you once again for the invitation, and we'll continue being a resource to you all. So yeah, thanks again.
All right. Well, Wado, and thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.